This has been a tumultuous last few months in many different regards, where every different part of society has faced some sort of tumult, it seems. And there was a lot of discussion and conversation about the role of law enforcement and the appropriate place that it has in society. Very disturbing summer, a lot of disturbing images. And I just want to go ahead and use this opportunity to analyze this week's portion, this week's Parsha Shoftim, which I believe gives us some very important insights on how we should view various different institutions that society depends on. So one of the institutions that society depends on is the law enforcement institution law enforcement. The beginning of the parsha begins by saying, Shoftim v'shotrim, hitin l'cha b'chol sharecha, asher Hashem Elokecha nosim l'chol hashmata. You shall place judges and officers in all the gates that God, in the land that God has blessed you. This mitzvah, by the way, of having officers and judges having an appropriate judicial system to go ahead and oversee just society is in fact one of the 7 Noahide laws. It's a mitzvah upon all of society, not just the Jewish people, to go ahead and make sure that we have a justice system that is appropriately overseeing the proper functioning of society. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of authority does the judicial system have? Or as we, as Americans would like to term it, are there any sort of systems of checks and balances? Any sort of system, the Torah says there should be checks and balances on these institutions, because sometimes we know if somebody has, if a person or institution has too much power, that power can go ahead and be abused. So I just want to go ahead and point out that before addressing that particular question, that the Parsha talks about various different aspects of society in terms of the institutions that it addresses in this week's Parsha. Mentioned the judicial system, but it also focuses on the political system. The political system that the Torah addresses was the system of the monarchy, that the people, as it says in Sefer Shmuel, the book of Samuel, wanted to go ahead and have a governmental system that runs with a head of government who is the monarch. And the Torah devotes great detail to that. And we also learn about the religious leadership, the Kohanim, the Leviim, their appropriate roles, their appropriate responsibilities. And we also learn about the other aspect of religious leadership, which was the prophets, and their roles and responsibilities as well. In each of the institutions, we find the mandate and the responsibility that they have. But one thing we see across the board, there's no unfettered license to go ahead and just what can lead to abuse of power. You shall have gates, you shall have judges and officers in all your lands. And then it says, you shall not go ahead and pervert justice. Losata mishpat, losakir panim. Don't go ahead and look favorably at one side or the other side. No, he's the wealthy guy in the room, or opposite. I'm looking out for the poor man. No, you always have to go ahead and look in an even-handed way. You shall not take bribes. As the Torah says, because bribes will blind the eyes of the righteous. Tzedek, tzedek tirdo. You shall go ahead and pursue justice. I want to focus on this aspect of So first of all, we see over here that the notion of having a society that has a robust system of law enforcement, of officers that serve and protect society, and judges that make sure that the criminal elements are prosecuted and that people's property rights and assets are protected and so on and so forth. That is a bedrock of not only modern day judicial system, but the biblical system that was placed unto us by Moshe in the name of God. But not only that, because we have such value for the institutions around us, be it wherever we may find ourselves. Wherever we may find ourselves. Today we find ourselves in the United States of America. But we've had many different host countries over the years. We've always valued the institutions of government, so much so that the Pirkei Avos teaches us that we should go ahead and mispal b'shlom shel malchus. You shall go ahead and pray in the name for the peace of the government, even though the particular head of state, the particular head of government may not be the president that you favor, or may not be the governor that you favor, or may not be the mayor that you favor. It doesn't really matter. The point is we're supposed to pray for the welfare of the institution because they are safeguarding, or they are supposed to go ahead and be looking out for society. I want to go ahead and focus on two different examples, how we see that there's accountability for the authority figures in society. The first example is for the Kohen. The Kohen is a prestigious spiritual role, but nonetheless, the Kohen has to go ahead and be accountable to the justice system. If the Kohen wants to go ahead and hide behind religion to go ahead and shield himself from grant himself immunity from the law, not only is that considered inappropriate, but in fact there is a pasuk in the Torah that actually discusses that explicitly. The Torah says in Parshas Mishpatim, where somebody goes ahead and intentionally strikes his fellow man and kills him, even if he's a Kohen, he's on the altar, arrest him. There's no such thing to hide, use religion to go ahead and shield you from the law. Unfortunately, many times over the years, we've seen people abuse this notion where they have committed a crime and they want to go ahead and hide in a religious institution or use religious law for whatever reason. The Torah teaches us the opposite. To serve is a privilege. And when the leaders abuse that trust, they don't have that. So yes, of course we believe in investing, that they should have authority and they should hold society accountable for us to have a judicial system and a religious system and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, that authority is not unfettered access, and one must go ahead and make sure that the authority that they have is not abused. Another example that we find is with the king. Us Americans, we like to go ahead and pride ourselves with the notion of separation of church and state. Separation of church and state is in the First Amendment. But we find in the Torah, how you interpret and define the separation of church and state is a whole separate issue. Many different constitutional scholars and Supreme Court decisions view differently. But the Torah itself says when it comes to a king, when it comes to the head of government, what is something that he's supposed to have around him at all times, says the Torah. Before that, when he sits on the seat of government, because of as Mishneh Torah, as those write this Torah, I'll say it from right in front of the monarch should always study the Torah. L'man Yilmad, he should go ahead and study. L'yiras Hashem will come to fear the Almighty. L'shmor is called divrei Torah azos, to go ahead and upkeep the Torah. So what we see from over here is, yes, we're supposed to go ahead and have a monarch. And yes, his political leadership is supposed to be strong. And yes, he should have the authority to arrest people, and he should have the authority to go ahead and be able to execute the functions of government. On the other hand, if the monarch or the head of state is going to go get carried away with their power and have abuse of power, that's also not good. So what's going to go ahead and remind the monarch for this? And the answer is the Torah will remind the monarch of his humble beginnings. So ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to us, what I see as a takeaway, although we can discuss this in other examples, more at length, that the functions of government, the institutions that we have, the judicial system, the political system, the religious system, they're supposed to have authority, because without the authority to make arrests, to go ahead and prosecute criminals, without the authority to go ahead and make sure that the law is enforced, so society can become chaotic. On the other hand, when these officers, when these judges, when these leaders go ahead and abuse their authority, they must be held fully accountable, not only according to the secular law, but according to the Torah law as well. So anybody that leans too much to one side versus the other side has to go ahead and realize the perfect balance that the Torah advocates on this issue. Yes, we must go ahead and have functioning institutions in government to make sure that we have a just and fair society. But we can never allow those elements to have absolute power, because as the Torah says, that can go ahead and lead to a corrupt society. I wish everybody a good Erev Shabbos.